Hello, 7th grade art. So this is a video demonstration of how to draw one of the landscapes that is on the Google Slides presentation. One of the key things to remember is to make sure that whatever you are drawing, whether it's something that is on the presentation or whether it is something else entirely, one of the most important things to remember is that you do want to make sure that you have that reference image out and that it is visible so that you can see exactly what it is you were drawing. Because no matter how well you remember what something looks like, when you try to draw it from memory, it will not necessarily turn out the way that you intend. So now, quick reminders, when you are drawing, especially a landscape or something like that, one of the main things to do is to remember to start from the back and work your way up. That is especially true when you get to the painting steps, but it can also be very beneficial when you are on the drawing steps as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is on my paper, first of all, I've got it turned horizontally, which is technically considered landscape orientation, so that way I have room for the entire landscape on this page. And then the first thing that I'm going to do is just draw that furthest back mountain. If I look at where it starts, it's about at the halfway point. So halfway up, halfway down, somewhere in there. And I'm just going to start by drawing that line. And then the highest point of the mountain is right over here, close to the end of the page, but not at the edge. And then it kind of stops here because another mountain or shrub or something comes in front of it. So then the next thing I would do would be to actually go ahead and put that in. And I'm not going to worry too much about the bottom of everything yet, simply because that's going to come along once we get there. My next step is going to be to add this next mountain in here that goes almost all the way to this edge of the furthest back mountain. And then it starts to slope down about here. So then my next thing is going to be to just kind of the outline almost of all the littler things that are in front of the mountains. Not all the crazy detail yet. Because one of the key things to remember is to start basic. Start simple. And then the more complex you get, with each layer and each new thing that you can add more detail. So don't worry if the beginning stages of your drawing does not look very detailed or very accurate. And then there's kind of like a shadow here almost. And then the edge of the grass. And then this one comes down a little more. And then there's a tree in front of it, so I'm just going to put kind of a blob right now. And then there's an even smaller tree in front of that one. And then the path sort of comes from here, curves out, and then curves across on this side. And then it gets widest here, over here. And then the widest part of the path on this side of things is actually more towards the front. And I'm going to just leave the man out. You can include him if you want to, but you don't necessarily need to because your focus, once again, is the landscape itself. Now, so far, I have not done the palm trees yet, but I'm not even going to do them yet still, because what I'm going to do is go back into what I have here and just really make sure that I've got all of my lines accurate and make any changes, add any more bumps or anything that might be different on what I've started. Like this comes up a little higher and goes over more. And then this top is not quite as pointy. So I'm going to adjust that. And then this one slopes up just a little higher and then comes down. And then once I make some of those corrections, I'm going to erase my original lines. After I've already double checked and changed and corrected things. So once again, it's very important to make sure that you look for the simpler shapes in the overall design or image or landscape or whatever it is that you are drawing. So now I'm going to add in this sort of rock here. And there's some pink bushes in front of it, so I'm just going to kind of make them look bushy. And then the rock comes behind them. And then there's kind of a tree here, so I'm just going to draw a little bit of the trunk. Because all of the trees in this one kind of have a little bit of the trunk visible, and then you just kind of see the shape of the leaves behind the trunk. You don't really see individual leaves or individual trunk parts. And then some of the little bushes back here, I'm just going to kind of put mounds because they're just slightly different shades of green. So I'm just going to want to make sure I have them drawn in there so that I remember to make them different shades of green. Again, erasing pencil lines as I go along, but not erasing anything too much all at one time. Because you don't want to necessarily erase all of your lines and then forget what you have already corrected. So there's kind of like an orange bush here, and then you see the mountain kind of coming in front of here, and then going behind the bush. So I'm going to erase the part of the bush that is there. And then this mountain comes up and goes over where I've got it. And then there's kind of some more bushes in front of the mountain here. So again, I'm just going to kind of give them the texture, the bushiness there. And then this is actually a tree. So I'm going to make it look a little wonkier, more tree-like. And then I see just a smidge of the trunk in here. But again, it's mostly just the tree itself, the shape of the tree. And then this one has more of a, not a fir tree almost, but kind of like a Christmas tree. So I gotta get that shape in there. And then there's a little trunk back here that comes down, and then the trunk from this tree comes here. And then there's a spot of the trunk up here, and then a little more tree, which is kind of a weird shape. But once again, it's important to make sure that you find all of those weird shapes and you add all of those detail, because that's what's going to make it really recognizable in terms of exactly which painting you are reproducing. So then the shadow space sort of goes behind the tree. Just erasing so that the trunk can be in front of the part that's behind it. And then there's kind of a pink bush here, so I'm just going to draw that sort of shape. It looks almost like a pink rock, but it's a bush, I can tell, because it has some texture there. And then there's just kind of a whole row of sort of a light green bush coming in front of this whole area. So I'm just going to kind of draw sort of a squiggly bush type thing there. And then it kind of comes to a point right here. And then I'm going to double check my path that I have in here. The path kind of goes off the page and then branches out. So kind of like that. So once again, this is not necessarily 100% finished, but I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can just kind of see parts and pieces. But now this landscape sketch would be ready for any last minute detail, any sort of changes you need to do before adding paint, and then it would be ready to go ahead and start adding the paint too. It does take a little time. It does take a couple different layers and a couple different practice tries and things like that. But then once I know that I'm ready to start adding paint, I want to make sure, once again, that my reference image is up and ready so that I can make sure that my colors that I use and mix and put on the paper match what I'm seeing.